This is Grandmaster Boris Alterman and you're watching Gambit Guide. Hello and welcome everybody. We continue today's Gambit Guide series about the Blackmar Diemer Gambit and the second part. So in the first lecture I explained you the main ideas of the sacrifice which was discovered by Blackmar and then developed by the right moves order by Emil Diemer. So this is the actual position after knight f6 when white is sacrificing the pawn after f3. So once again I would like to remind you that in the Blackmar Diemer Gambit usually white is trying to develop all his pieces. I mean, of course white is trying to play for the development advantage. However, it's a quite big difference from the open situation which we studied in the two knights defense or in the Danish Gambit, Evans Gambit. So the position here is quite closed and it's not so easy to find a serious target against in a black's position, and to organize the attack against the black skin is also not so easy. So definitely we have a lot of tactical opportunities in different tactical ideas. However, you have to be a very strong player and to understand very good the idea of Blackmar Diemer Gambit in order to use your, I would say, not so big compensation for the sacrificed pawn. I would like to start with a few games played by the inventor of this opening line, the Emil Diemer. So he played it in 48 to 53. He played some matches with Klaus Loher and with the Ports, and he played in some tournament in Switzerland. The first game was played in 1948 against Klaus Loher, which I would like to start with. So after e takes f3. So in the early development of the gambit, so white usually played queen takes f3, and this move used to be the main continuation in the Blackmar Diemer gambit. On the later on, only later on, so knight takes f3, the most natural, becomes just more popular in that line. So queen takes d4. In the previous lecture we saw a few games played with this line after bishop e3, and one more short game after queen b4 alone castling and e6. Instead of e6 we already studied that bishop g4 is losing because of knight b5. Knight c6 is also going to be quite difficult position for black after knight b5. So at that time black played e6. But even after e6 and knight b5, this is not so easy position for black. So pawn on c7 is under attack. Queen a5. a3. So white is intending to attack the black's queen after b4. Knight a6. b4. Queen a4. But of course the position on the queen on a4 just cannot be called so good. So it's quite dubious position for black. So white not only having the development advantage, but also his pieces are just very good placed when black's pieces are just very, very passive. Bishop d4, bishop e7, bishop b2, castling short side, and bishop c4 is just very, very difficult for black to get rid of white's initiative. And after one blunder c6, the game is finished immediately. After knight c3, suddenly the queen is trapped. So after taking a pawn on d4 and bishop e3, black also tested here to play queen g4. So quite logical continuation. It's trying to exchange the queens, and with the 2 pawns up, of course black just would be very, very happy to trade the strongest, the most powerful piece on the board. So definitely white has to avoid and to play queen f2. And this situation happened in the other game played with the same openings. c6, Black is trying to avoid knight b5 ideas, but it was not so necessary. White played simply knight f3. It's hard to call that White is having full compensation for the two sacrificed pawns. Knight bd7 and now long castling. So Black prevent White from playing knight e5 and finally moved e6, a3. So not allowing Black's bishop to be developed on b4, bishop e7, bishop d3, and short castling. So I believe that in this position, Black were considering his position as quite safe. So White has only one opportunity to start his attack on the king side, is just to attack the Black's strongest piece after h3, queen h5, g4, queen a5, queen h4. So for the first time, White is intending something serious. So after g4, g5, it would be quite difficult for Black to stop queen takes h7 or bishop takes h7 move. Still, White has better development and quite serious prospects on the king side. g6. So for a second, Black just locked the diagonal, but now the problem becomes quite obvious. All the dark squares near the Black's king, and White plays knight g5, keeping an eye on h7 pawn. So now we are threatening maybe to play knight e4, trying to get rid of the last defender of the h7 square, and knight on f6, king g7. So Black decided just to avoid any tricks and to play rook h8, protecting the pawn on h7. This looks very interesting, very good, and not so clear how White could continue his attack, but now Diemer found just very nice opportunity to continue. Let's try to find it. Suddenly this position White just performs very nice combination. Queen goes to h6 with a check. White is sacrificing the full queen. So suddenly it's not so easy for Black to find a good defense. So maybe the best answer here is to go for king g8. Still White could maybe play knight xf7, or first of all to start with bishop d4. However, king takes h6, knight takes e6 check. So g5 is the only try to escape from the maiden net. And now knight takes g5. Still Black's king is in a very, very tough situation. So this position Black just didn't find the way to avoid the immediate checkmate and resigned. But let's see. Let's try to look for any defense. Clearly that queen takes g5 is a checkmate after bishop takes g5. After f takes e6, White plays knight takes e6, and the mate is still inevitable after queen g5 and bishop takes g5. And let's try other opportunity, knight takes g4. Still after h takes g4, this is a checkmate, this time from the rook. So this, to stop knight takes f7, Black has to play probably only knight e4, intending after bishop takes e4 to play bishop takes g5. So it was the only opportunity for Black. However, White's attack is just very, very powerful even here, and it's very difficult for Black to find here the solution. Check from the bishop, and then we can continue with the checking to g5. Extremely difficult to find for Black any solution. The mate is coming very soon. Something like that. And finally. So, with such a great position of all our pieces, it would be extremely difficult, of course, for Black to escape from this mating strength. So, queen h6, this move decides the game. One more interesting game. played against the Ports in Lindo, game number 1 from the match 1948. So, of course, with white pieces, Emil Diemer, d4, d5, e4, d takes e4, knight c3, knight f6, f3, e takes f3, queen takes f3, queen takes d4, bishop e3, queen g4, queen f2. And in this game, black decided that, of course, we have 2 pawns advantage, and every exchange only increase our material. So played knight e4, knight takes e4, queen takes e4, but with the trading of the knight, black just also allowed white to get more advantage, more initiative, because now queen on e4 is also good target for attacking. Long castling, intending at some point bishop b5 or knight f3, knight g5. So black plays a6. I cannot recommend this move because it's just waste of time. Knight f3, f6, bishop d3, queen a4, a3, knight c6. So now white has all his pieces in the game. Queen d2. So start threatening. So white is looking to the d7 or d8 squares. So trying to create the threats. Let's say after e5, and so what can we play? We can play just simply to bring the rook maybe in the center. Black made just quite serious mistake. He played bishop e6, and after rook h2 e1, castled alongside immediately. Bishop f2, attacking the bishop. Bishop f7, and absolutely surprising move, bishop f5 check. So this was completely overlooked by Ports. And after e6, rook takes e6. So this is the point of the combination. Black cannot capture on d2 because the checkmate immediate after rook e8. Black also losing after bishop takes e6, bishop takes e6, king b8, because a7 is under our control and white just wins with a simple sacrifice. Queen takes d8, knight takes d8, and rook takes d8, and this is a checkmate. So just 20 moves in as a miniature, but of course we have to take under consideration that the level of the players. Emil Diemer is quite famous with his ideas in the opening, that we can say exactly the same about his opponent, the Ports. So because here we can see obvious mistakes and tactical blunders, of course. 2 more games I would like to show you, which Diemer played already in 52 when he came to conclusion that in his main line, after knight c3, knight f6 and f3, e takes f3, is possible to play also knight takes f3 and not only queen takes f3. No need to sacrifice 2 pawns. After knight takes f3, white is reaching quite a serious compensation for a pawn. So let's understand why. First of all, we take more control over the center. So e5 is under our control. The e4 square is also under our control. So the bishop from f1 could go to c4, then white could go off or short cast and try to attack f7 square, or after moving the queen away, go into the long castling and try to organize the pawns attack on the king side. So this with, of course, active position of all the pieces in the center. So in his game against Pavel Janda from 1952, after g6, bishop c4, and bishop g7, knight e5. I'm not so sure this move is necessary. Possible also just simple to play short castling short side, and white played bishop g5, and after knight bd7 answered with short castling. Interesting situation. So knight takes e5 is quite dangerous immediately, because after d takes and queen takes d1, rook takes d1, and let's say knight goes somewhere to g4, white is having opportunity to sacrifice on f7. Let's say after rook takes f7, rook takes f7, and check here, force black to play bishop f8, and now we can continue the attack with simple move like e6, and then bishop takes e7, or knight d5, threatening knight takes e7, threatening knight takes e7, and of course possible to play something like bishop takes f7 immediately and then knight d5. But of course, after knight g4, this is also not, I would like, forced to capture on f7. Let's say a move like bishop takes e7 also leads to quite serious problem for black. So rook cannot leave the f8 square, because after rook e8, white is winning instantly with bishop takes f7. And black has to sacrifice exchange after knight takes e5, but then bishop takes f8, and of course white is having quite serious advantage. Just exchange up. So black first of all played c6 instead of capture on e5 immediately, and after bishop b3 only now decided to capture finally. It was probably better to play move like knight b6, intending to prevent white's attack over the f7 square in the future after knight b to d5 and then bishop e6. Still white is of course keeping the initiative, but this position is playable for black. Knight takes e5, d takes e5, so once again queen takes d1, as we saw before, doesn't work. So here any move of the knight we just simply capture on e7. And when we play queen b6 check, king h1, and knight g4, so white could continue his attack with e6, keeping initiative because the knight on g4 now is hanging. For instance, if knight f2, rook takes f2, queen takes f2, so white simply captures here and plays bishop takes e7 with a better game. However, e6 was met by knight f6, and after e takes f7, king h8, and queen e2, white position is clearly better. And Emil Diemer realized his advantage after 37 moves. Another plan for black after knight takes f3 in the starting point of the gambit is just simply to move his e pawn and not g pawn, e6. So first of all, after e6 there is no idea anymore for white to bring the bishop to c4. So white has to play bishop g5 and to develop this bishop to d3. Bishop e7, bishop d3, c6. So very safe. Short castling and knight bd7. So this position occurred in the game Emil Diemer against Marmud in Zurich tournament 1952. All white pieces looking towards the black's king side. However, we have to include our queen into the attack. So definitely it's possible to play something like queen d2 or queen e2. However, Diemer found the best continuation in this position, played queen e1, intending to transfer his queen to the king side immediately after queen h4 and then knight e5, intending of course h7 pawn. So of course white is planning that black is going to castle very soon. Knight b6. First of all we have to support the center. Rook d1 completes the development. Queen d6 and queen h4. So we can understand that black is trying to avoid castling. So it's right now black cannot castle anymore, because after short castling and bishop takes f6 there is no piece anymore which could protect the h7 pawn. And instead of short castling, black played knight b to d5. Knight e5. Thanks to the open files and the better position of the pieces, white has quite serious initiative. Knight takes c3, b takes c3. bishop d7, and so when all our pieces are already on the good position, it's time to move our pawns. c4, it's ready in c5, taking more space. Rook f8, c5, queen c7. I believe that even a move like c4 would bring quite obvious compensation for a pawn, but in such a situation, Diemer already looking for more than a compensation. He played knight c4, after which extremely difficult to avoid bishop f4 idea. Threatening the queen and intending to move white's knight to the hole on d6. So black answered b5, and right now white already had the opportunity to play bishop f4, but he decided to play knight e5, since b5 is quite serious target now for white on the king side. Long castling, a4, immediately opening the position on the queen side, and very soon white reached just very big advantage. So white is intending 8 takes b5, then rook is coming to the a file, maybe c4. Very soon the additional threat over the diagonal b8 h2. That's after bishop f4, after white move away his queen from h4. But let's see, when black played b5, I believe that bishop f4 was also quite good opportunity for white to continue this position. Let's say after queen c8 and knight d6 check, bishop takes and bishop takes, we have just great chances to demolish black's defense very soon. Our next threat is queen g5 or sacrifice on f6. So maybe the only try for black here is to play something like knight d5. So trying to counterattack. And in that case, after a knight d6, so black has queen takes d6. And then recapture our queen on h4 later on. So that's why probably Diemer decided to move his knight back, and after long castling just played a4 and kept quite strong initiative on the queen side. So if you look at the setup, which that it's quite standard for the Blackmar Diemer position. So after white capture on f3, so the most natural way to develop your pieces is bishop to d3, bishop to g5, short castling, and then we decide where we move a queen. So in such a situation, the queen, of course, the most natural is h4 square, attacking the black's king side. From e1, also white's queen could control e4, also e5 squares, so it could support the good outpost for the knight on e5 later on. In our next and the last lecture, I would like to show you that Blackmar Diemer gambit is even playable on the serious level, and if you even 2500 players from time to time using this aggressive opening line in order to meet queen's gambit after d4 and d5. Thanks everybody for watching. I believe you enjoy studying ideas of the Blackmar Diemer gambit. If you have any question, you can leave me a message on ICC, and see you next time.